Have you ever wondered what it would be like to pretend to be someone's wife, especially when you're starting to fall for them? And what if that someone was your boss? Get ready for a story full of emotions, where the unexpected makes love bloom. If you've ever been in situations where feelings defy reason, this story is for you. Let's dive in. Ryan Hayes was the heir to a great fortune, but his life was far from easy. Since childhood, the pressure to live up to his father's expectations was relentless. Henry Hayes, a business tycoon, was known for his cold demeanor and perfectionism. For him, business always came first, and there was no room for weaknesses or mistakes. Ryan grew up in this rigid environment, where every step was scrutinized, every decision judged, and nothing ever seemed good enough. At 28, after many failed attempts to impress his father, Ryan was finally given a significant challenge: to take over a failing subsidiary in Charleston, South Carolina. This was the opportunity he'd been waiting for, but it also seemed like a clear trap. The subsidiary was on the brink of bankruptcy, with a demotivated team and high employee turnover. Ryan knew that if he failed, it would be the end of any chance of being taken seriously in the family business. Upon arriving at the subsidiary, Ryan quickly realized that the challenge was even greater than he had imagined. Every day felt like a battle to keep the operation afloat, but he wasn't entirely alone. That's where he met Karen Parker, the office cleaner, who immediately caught his attention. Not because he expected her to become his greatest ally, but because Karen, despite her modest position, seemed to carry a light within her. She always had a smile for everyone, knew every employee by name, and offered words of encouragement, even when everything seemed to be falling apart. Ryan, who had always been a closed-off man, unexpectedly found in Karen someone he could confide in. One evening, after yet another frustrating meeting with the team, he stayed late at the office. The place was empty, except for Karen, quietly going about her work. Something prompted him to call her over for a chat, and he began to share his worries. He talked about his father's constant criticisms, the pressure to save the subsidiary, and the fear of failure. To Ryan's surprise, Karen not only listened attentively, but also offered simple yet profound advice. Karen was more than just a cleaner. She had studied business administration but had to drop out of college to care for her sick mother. Working as a cleaner was what she could do to support her family, but her management skills were still intact. Over time, Ryan began to value not only Karen's company, but also her insights on the challenges he was facing in the company. They became more than just colleagues, they became friends. Ryan started to rely on Karen as his confidant, and it didn't take long for her to become the only person he felt comfortable sharing his doubts and fears with. It was something new for him, someone he could let his guard down with, without the fear of being judged. In return, Karen opened up more about her own life. She spoke about her mother, who had been battling illness for years, and how difficult it was to juggle work with taking care of her. This exchange of confidences forged a strong bond between the two. Karen offered Ryan a different perspective on life and business. While he focused on goals and profits, she reminded him of the importance of caring for people, of creating an environment where the team felt valued. Inspired by her, Ryan began to implement small changes. He started listening to his employees more, giving them more autonomy, and trusting in their ideas. Gradually, the results began to show. But the challenge was far from over. Ryan's father, Henry, managed to arrange a crucial meeting with Michael Harrison, an investor who could save the subsidiary with a major financial injection. However, there was a catch. Harrison was a family man. He believed that businessmen who had families and were married were more focused and responsible. This meant that he didn't trust single men with major deals. And Ryan, a committed bachelor, needed to find a quick solution. Desperate, Ryan turned to the one person he trusted, Karen. In a moment of vulnerability, he made an unexpected proposal. He asked her to pretend to be his wife at the business dinner. Karen was speechless for a moment. The proposal seemed odd, and it wasn't just because of the absurdity of pretending to be his wife. She knew she was already starting to like Ryan. The idea of faking that kind of intimacy could blur the lines of her feelings even further. What if, in the midst of all this, she fell in love for real? She didn't want to admit it, but there were already moments when she found herself thinking about Ryan too much. It was as if something more was brewing behind their friendship, a spark she tried her best to ignore. When Ryan looked at her, with that serious and focused expression, her heart raced. And when he smiled, that rare, genuine smile, everything in Karen seemed to stop. She tried, of course, to push those thoughts away. He was her friend, her confidant. And he was her boss. Mixing things up would be a huge mistake. Ryan stood in front of her, with that determined look, waiting for an answer. He seemed nervous, as if he knew he was asking for something big. And he was. Karen wasn't sure if she could pretend to be his wife without making things even more complicated. Doubt consumed her. But on the other hand, there was that other side of Karen. The part of her that would never leave a friend in need, especially Ryan, who was so desperate to save the business and prove something to his father. She looked at him, and the desperation in Ryan's eyes convinced her. As risky as it was for her, Karen knew she couldn't say no. He needed her, and she couldn't refuse to stand by someone who had become so important in her life. In the days leading up to the dinner, Ryan and Karen spent more time together, rehearsing and planning what to say and how to act. They practiced lines, behaviors. The big day of the dinner arrived. Ryan was more nervous than ever, but when he looked at Karen, dressed elegantly and calm, his tension eased a bit. They had rehearsed everything. They knew how to behave, what to say, and how to keep up the charade without raising suspicion. But what no one had rehearsed were the feelings simmering beneath the surface. Karen tried to keep her composure. The role of being Ryan's wife was supposed to be just an act, but the truth was, she was in love. Every time Ryan smiled at her, her heart raced, and the physical closeness the dinner demanded made her feel even more vulnerable. At every moment, she reminded herself this was just an arrangement. They were there to save the business, and when it was all over, they would go back to being just friends. At least, that's what Karen told herself, even though she knew her feelings were far from simple friendship. During the dinner, Michael Harrison, the investor, seemed convinced that Karen and Ryan were the perfect couple. They laughed together, exchanged glances, and at one point, Karen held Ryan's hand under the table as part of the disguise. But the touch wasn't just an act. She felt a shiver run through her body, and when she looked into Ryan's eyes, she realized he was feeling something different too. Something he might not have fully understood yet, but it was there. The dinner was a success. Michael Harrison, impressed not only by Ryan's skills but also by Karen's presence, sealed the deal, securing the future of the subsidiary. But that night, it wasn't just the company that changed. Something had shifted between Ryan and Karen. From that moment on, Ryan began to see Karen in a different light. He couldn't quite explain why, but he started noticing details he hadn't before. The way she smiled, the way she looked at him with understanding, and the lightness she brought into his life. She wasn't just a friend or a confidant anymore. There was something more there. In the days that followed the dinner, everything seemed more complicated. Both of them tried to hide their feelings. Ryan, being the boss, feared that Karen might misunderstand him. He thought that if he confessed what he was feeling, she might think he was just confused after all the stress. Worse yet, Ryan didn't want to lose the friendship he valued so much. But Karen was struggling too. She was convinced that Ryan only saw her as a friend, nothing more. After all, he had never given any clear signs that he wanted something else, right? And so, they continued this silent game. Stolen glances at the office, conversations that seemed ordinary but carried a different tension, and the constant closeness that made everything more difficult. Until one day, during one of their usual after-work outings, everything changed. They were sitting at a cafe, laughing about something silly, when an unexpected rain began to pour outside. Both ran for the nearest shelter, laughing and completely drenched. It was a scene straight out of a movie. Karen shook her wet hair, and between laughs, she looked at Ryan, noticing the way he was watching her. Ryan's eyes were fixed on her, but this wasn't the look of a friend. There was something different. An intensity she had never seen before. The moment seemed to freeze in time. Without thinking much, Ryan gently pulled her closer and kissed her. It wasn't just any kiss. It was intense, filled with suppressed desire and everything they had been trying to hide for weeks. The world around them seemed to disappear. The rain kept falling, but they didn't notice. All that existed was that moment, that kiss. But as soon as the kiss ended, Ryan pulled away abruptly. I'm sorry, Karen, he said, breathless. He looked confused, struggling to process what had just happened. I shouldn't have done that. I don't want you to think that I'm using you or... Karen interrupted him, her heart still racing. She looked him in the eyes, unafraid, and spoke the truth she had been holding on to for so long. Ryan, you don't have to apologize. The truth is, I think I'm in love with you. And it's not just from now. I've been trying to hide it for weeks, maybe even since that dinner. The silence that followed felt like it lasted an eternity. Ryan looked at her, surprised and at the same time, relieved. He wasn't the only one who had been trying to deny what he felt. "I feel the same way, Karen," he finally said. "I think I've been trying to fight it too, but I can't anymore." From that day on, nothing was the same. The relationship between Ryan and Karen transformed. They were no longer just friends and confidants. The love that had been growing between them could no longer be hidden. They continued working together, but now there was a much deeper connection. A romance that, even if they hadn't wanted to admit it at first, had been inevitable all along. But, as with everything in Ryan's life, complications didn't take long to appear. Sometime later, his father Henry found out about the arrangement between them. For Henry, discovering that Karen had pretended to be Ryan's wife during that dinner felt like a betrayal. He confronted his son, furious. "You lied to close a deal. You used this woman to deceive an investor," Henry shouted, pointing out all the flaws in the plan. However, Ryan didn't back down. For the first time, he stood up to his father. "I didn't lie, Dad. I did what was necessary to save the company, but what I found with Karen goes far beyond that. And you're not going to tell me it was a mistake. Because for the first time, I found someone who truly believes in me, and I won't let you ruin that." Henry fell silent for a moment, clearly surprised by Ryan's firmness. He had always seen his son as someone who needed to be shaped and controlled. But now, seeing him standing there, defending Karen and his own decisions, he realized that Ryan had changed. He had become the man Henry always wanted him to be, but in a way he never expected. In the months that followed, Ryan and Karen stayed together, building a relationship that only grew stronger. Karen went back to school and finished her degree, while Ryan took on more responsibilities at the company, proving day by day that he was ready to lead. And as for Henry? Well, the relationship between father and son still had its challenges, but for the first time, Henry began to see Ryan as a man capable of making his own decisions, both in business and in his personal life. In the end, he acknowledged that with Karen by Ryan's side, the company, and his son, were in good hands. And so, what began as a risky arrangement to save a company turned into a real love story, full of challenges but also victories. Ryan and Karen proved that sometimes, the most unexpected connections are the ones that change our lives forever. Did you enjoy this story? Then don't forget to hit that like button and, of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more heartwarming stories like this one. Your support makes all the difference in helping us continue bringing quality content. And hey, if you love intense love stories with plenty of twists, make sure to check out our playlist showing up here on the end screens. There are even more beautiful stories waiting for you. So click on it, grab your popcorn, and get ready to be moved even more. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.